Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. It's me, Muhammad Zubair Khan, and today I'm here with the second lecture of the third week. And in the previous lecture, we were discussing the components of the frequency distribution. So we had discussed the two components of the frequency distribution, that was the class limit and the class boundaries. Now, today we will discuss the two more components of the frequency distribution, and that is class mark and class interval. What is meant by class mark? So, class mark is the mid value of each class, and this is denoted by X, and you can get the class mark by using the two formulas, any one of these two formulas. The first formula is lower class limit plus upper class limit divided by 2. It means that you are finding basically the average of the class, the average of the group, the average of the class. Because we are facing two types of classes, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, that in case if we have the discontinuous form, so how we can get the class marks, and if we have the continuous form, so how we can get the class mark. In case of discontinuous form, in case if the classes are given like this in discontinuous form, so what we have to do, we will write the lower class limit plus upper class limit divided by 2. This is the lower class limit 5, upper class limit 9, divided by 2. So 14 divided by 2, 7. 7 is the class mark, or you can say 7 is the mid value of each of the first class. What is the mid value of the second class? You will add lower class limit plus upper class limit divided by 2. Means 10 plus 14 divided by 2. 10 plus 14 will become 24 divided by 2. It will become 12. So 12 is the mid value of the second class. Then the third one is 15 plus 19 divided by 2. 15 plus 19 divided by 2. 15 plus 19, 34 divided by 2. So when you divide 34 by 2, it will become 17. So 17 is the next mid value of the third class. So by this way you can find out the class mark. You need the class mark. As I mentioned, that these components of the frequency distributions are very much important, and you will need it again and again in upcoming classes. When we will discuss the different types of averages, when we will discuss the different types of presentation of the data, so there we will need the class limits, there we will need the class boundaries, there we will need the class marks also. Therefore, you need to understand that how you can calculate the class limit, how you can understand that what is mean by class limit, what is mean by class mark, what is mean by class boundaries, what is mean by class interval. That's why these components are very much important to understand. So by this way you can find out the class limits of the class mark of the given classes. In case if the classes are given in continuous form, suppose we have the classes in this form. Suppose we have classes and we need to find out the class marks, means X. We are denoting it by X. And let we have classes like this: 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, and so on. So what will be the first mid value of the first class? 5 plus 10. 5 plus 10 divided by 2. Here you will write 5 plus 10 divided by 2. 15 divided by 2. It will become 7.5. It will become 7.5. Or the next one, 10 plus 15 divided by 2. 10 plus 15 divided by 2. So 25 divided by 2, it will become 25 divided by 2, it will become 12.5. So the second mid value is 12.5. The third one is 15 plus 20, 35 divided by 2. So it will become 17.5. Then 20 plus 25, 45 divided by 2. So it will become 22.5. So by this way you can find out the class marks. By this way you can find out the mid value of these classes. As I mentioned, if you have two types of classes. if you have the continuous classes, if you have the discontinuous classes. So you can find out the class marks of these classes by using these formulas, these two formulas. In case of class boundaries, you will use this one formula. In case of class limit, you will use this one formula. So this was about the class marks that you are finding for different purposes in a frequency distribution, and it's important very much. The second one is the class interval. What is class interval? Class interval basically is the difference between the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. You need to understand the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. These are class boundaries. When the classes are in continuous form, like this, like 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, the classes are in continuous form. Continuous means there is a repetition, as I discussed in previous lecture. So the starting and the difference between the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. Upper class boundary, lower class boundary difference. The difference between the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. Difference mean manfi. So 10 minus 5, 5. The difference between the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. 15 minus 10, 5. The difference between the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. 20 minus 15, again 5. The difference between the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. 25 minus 20, again 5. So this is basically called what? Class interval. It is denoted by H, small h we are denoting it. And class interval, class width, class length, these are different names that we are using for it. Class interval means just waqfa mavene groups mavene class just by the yak rakam basha. So if we subtract the lower class boundary from the upper class boundary, so we can get that particular interval, and you will need this particular interval again and again in upcoming classes. That's why it's need to understand. It's very much simple. What is the class interval? The difference between upper class boundary and lower class boundary is called what? Class interval. It is denoted by what? H. Or the difference between the two consecutive upper class limits or lower class limit. Two consecutive matlab chiyas mutawatir. Consecutive upper class limit or lower class limit. It will be 5 again. Look at. These are two consecutive upper class limit, or these are two consecutive lower class limits. These are discontinuous form of the classes. That's why they are called class limits. So the difference between these two, 10 minus 5, again 5. Or we can say 15 minus 10, again 5. Or we can say the difference between two consecutive upper class limit, 14 minus 9, 5. 19 minus 14, 5. So you will get the same interval again and again. When you are finding the class intervals, if the classes are in continuous form, if the classes are in discontinuous form, so you can use these techniques to find out the class interval in each case. In case if the classes are in discontinuous form or the classes are in continuous form, so you can find out the class mark. Today's lesson was related to the class mark and the class interval. Class mark is the mid value of each class. If the classes are in continuous form, means if the class boundaries are given. If the classes are in discontinuous form, means if the class limits are given. So you can find out the mid value of these classes by using these formulas. And the class interval basically showing the width, the length, the difference amongst the classes. So you can find out if the classes are in continuous form, means if the class boundaries are given. So it is the difference between the upper class boundary and lower class boundary. Upper class boundary and lower class boundary. Only difference between these two boundaries. And if the class limits are given, means the discontinuous form is given like this. So this is the difference between the two consecutive upper class boundaries. It means that in class boundaries form, you can you can find out the class interval horizontally as well as vertically. But if the class limits are given, you can only find out the class interval by subtracting vertically, not horizontally. If we do it horizontally, so 9 minus 5, it will become 4, which is wrong. That's why you will do it vertically, Umudi. So this is the way that how you can calculate, how you can find out the class limits, and you can find out the class marks and class interval. So I will give you some assignment related to these topics and you will do practice on these assignment. Thank you very much. Khuda Hafiz. Take care.